There are two major broadcasting companies in the UK, the British Bias Corporation and Ignorant Television. Nothing much sets them apart when it comes to using propaganda to keep the average person severely misinformed, especially when it comes to video games. We previously covered BBC's The Game Changers, an unauthorised docudrama based on the creators of Grand Theft Auto, who then sued the BBC, probably over its gross inaccuracies and its juvenile portrayal of Sam Houser.
How in traditional role-playing games you can train yourself to be a better shitty swordsman or do better shitty little goblin spells.
ITV has had several programmes on video games. Back when Richard and Judy were hosts on This Morning, I once watched them gasp in horror when they were told by a so-called expert that violent video games had a demonstrably negative effect on the brain. That's when I realised that these kinds of talk show hosts will just believe anything that they're told. They're not real journalists that actually do research on the topics that they're meant to be investigating. They're sock puppets of a giant media corporation pushing an agenda. Yes, that was my opinion at 14. Fast forward to present day and not much has changed. ITV recently put out a series of programmes in response to the huge popularity of the game Fortnite. The worst offender was Good Morning Britain, hosted by Piers Morgan, a man for whom propaganda is his bread and butter. Let's see what him and his co-hosts had to say about video games.
Well, the Mirror warns that children need to be taught the dangers of addictive video games, describing their surge in popularity as a crisis in our classrooms. And we're going to be debating that very issue about 7:40 today. Yeah. It's a big issue, these games. Kids are addicted to.
Well, it's funny that the Mirror should use the term crisis in our classrooms and relate that to video games specifically, because recently the standard of education here in the UK has been on a downward spiral, a massive downward spiral. And that's due to, funding cuts. Things like music are getting taken away for no real reason, even though, it's an obvious benefit to people. And it's also the detrimental effects of the mass privatisation of our secondary schools, turning them into so-called academies, which is having a real effect on children's education.
Well, in April, we filmed with 15-year-old Alex Merson, who told us he enjoys playing the game because it's fun and fast-paced. But should parents look at banning the game now?
Whoa. Why is he so close to the screen? What's going on here? Also, what is going on with his fingers? Like, it's almost as if he hasn't ever held a controller before. I mean, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt and say this guy isn't an actor, but this looks eerily similar to when you see someone who's clearly pretending to play a video game.
Here to debate this, behavioural specialist Loreen Mara, who says Fortnite is addictive. It should be banned.
So that's the position we're starting with, is it? Just an outright ban on Fortnite because it is addictive, regardless of context. So anything that could potentially be addictive should also be banned. Beside her is Andy Robertson, who has recently finished a book all about being a responsible parent when it comes to children's use of video games.
Yeah, games have a lot more to them than just entertainment. I think the danger of just looking at screen time and sort of limiting that and just sort of throwing them away means that you stop that healthy debate around that. We don't worry about plate time when we think about diet, we worry about what's on the plate.
Although Andy's point is fair and well thought out, he could have done with expanding upon it a bit in this discussion. I think he would have done well to actually come up with some more examples of different games and how they actually benefit people, rather than just focusing on Fortnite. Of course, that would have been much easier if the hosts hadn't constantly derailed the conversation by trying to go back to Fortnite over and over again and focusing on the initial point of too much screen time.
What worries me is the fact that it's free and then it's linked to a credit card. I had an example last night of a mum that phoned me that told me her child was playing it. Suddenly she looked on on the phone. The credit card had just had a debit placed on it by this child.
So what's happened here is the parent has failed to realise or failed to set up parental controls around the purchasing of microtransactions in Fortnite, which is very easy to do. If you're a parent and you've set up your credit card details on a phone or on a console, you know those details are on there. You know that it can be used to purchase stuff. So why not do a bit of research, or at least tell your child and make sure that they know that they're not allowed to spend that money on there. Or it's very, very easy to set up parental controls.
I think the truth of the matter is we have to have parental control. And she closed the door and she sat outside the room, and the kid turned around to his other friends online saying, "It worked."
What? So you're telling me that the kid went, "It worked," to his friends as if he did it intentionally and the parent overheard this and did nothing about it? If that was my kid, I'd be like, okay, so you did that on purpose, therefore Fortnite is off the table, like you're never playing that again. I think that's what I would do.
The issue about Fortnite is that it's not often that teachers issue a warning to parents about a particular game.
And if you would use a thing called logic for just 1 second, you would realise that because Fortnite is one of the most popular games at the moment, when teachers are reporting that children are coming in too tired because they've been playing video games too much, chances are they're going to have been playing Fortnite because it's popular. That doesn't mean that Fortnite in particular is bad compared to other video games.
There's a story in the Mirror, right? 9-year-old girl.
Oh, what's that, Piers?
9-year-old girl.
Sorry, I didn't catch that. What did you say?
9-year-old girl is in intensive therapy after becoming so hooked on Fortnite, she wet herself to keep playing.
Well, as you're a well-respected journalist, I'm sure you've done your research on Fortnite and know exactly what it is, and also know that it has an age rating of 12.
The girl secretly got up in the night and played until dawn, neglected to go to the toilet because she couldn't bear to leave the screen, hit her father in the face when he tried to confiscate her Xbox gaming console. She's a 9-year-old girl.
Sounds like the parents should take the consoles out of the room if she's playing through the night. That sounds like a good thing to do, don't you think? And maybe not let her play games that are rated above her age.
You have to, as a parent, exercise parental responsibility. If she was up all night doing this, I would just take it away. I mean, surely it has to start with parents. I mean,
so of course here Piers is 100% right, but the thing about this discussion that really gets me is he keeps saying that it's about parental responsibility and all this, and that it's the parent's job to make sure that these things aren't getting out of hand. But then he keeps going back on that over and over and making unfounded claims about video games in general being bad for you, being addictive, and scrambling your brain.
it is too convenient to park blame
100%.
elsewhere. This is a
100%.
parental issue. That's an addiction. That's people being hooked on what they're seeing on a screen. I don't think the game Fortnite is the arch criminal here. And by the way, it does scramble their brains.
And by that logic, you could say that seeing anything on a screen for extended periods of time, even shows produced by ITV, such as The X Factor and Britain's Got Talent, could be seen as being addicted to something.
But parents need to be able to make an informed choice about what other games they're playing and play a role in broadening that diet of games.
But it's not the game, it's the amount of time they're playing the game.
I disagree.
Well, Andy isn't denying the issue of screen time when it comes to parenting a child. He's merely suggesting that, in addition to that, we introduce children to a diverse array of games that could stimulate their minds a bit more, rather than just focusing on Fortnite, which, let's be honest, is pretty much the same thing over and over, and it's not very stimulating.
That is
No,
I think there's
Can we just
something
say
about
something
this
here?
game, and I
Can we
think
just
parents
say
watching would
something?
agree.
Forgive
No, there's nothing about Fortnite that you couldn't also attribute to Call of Duty, for instance, which until recently was the most popular multiplayer shooter.
Parents today do not know how to say no.
Right.
Because if
I
you
agree.
say no, then you make yourself unpopular, and you parents then believe that if they're unpopular, the children won't come to them with problems. Rubbish.
And nothing that you just said can be applied to video games in particular, really. That was just a general statement that can be applied to any area of parenting. You're saying that Fortnite should be banned and that would apparently solve the problem, but then you haven't actually said what the problem about Fortnite is in relation to what you're saying about parenting.
Take the damn thing off them. limit it to 30 minutes a day.
Not even, only at the weekend.
Oh God, see, this is the problem. When you don't know anything about video games, you can make statements like, oh, you should only be playing half an hour of video games a week, without even having any context to that or any research to back up what he's saying. I once took my PS1 round to my grandma's and I was playing Final Fantasy VII at the time, and I set everything up and I was about to start playing, and Grandma said, oh, make sure you're only playing it for 10 minutes, okay? And I looked at her and I was like, but 10 minutes, like, I wouldn't even be able to get from one save point to the next in 10 minutes. And of course she didn't understand what I was talking about, but looking back, I of course know now that the reason I was good at particular things at a younger age than usual, like reading for instance, was because I played Final Fantasy at such a young age. And that's exactly what Andy's talking about. Like, if you introduce a variety of games, hopefully your child will sort of pick up on one or two particular types of games that actually stimulate them intellectually, and that will lead to, you know, growth. You just have to hope that they don't succumb to the mass advertising that games like Call of Duty put out, because in my opinion they are the true sort of, you know, mind-numbing games that are just the same over and over.
I think a much sort of healthier way to do that is to develop a debate and a conversation with your child.
A great point again, Andy, and you could say the same thing about any topic when it comes to raising a child. Always have a conversation with them and make sure they understand what's going on. But hold on a sec, because Piers wants to derail the conversation again because you're making too much sense.
Do you let them spend 10 hours a day on their games?
No, I don't.
What do you do?
So we talk about it. We'll play with them. I think parents...
How much time do you let them play on them?
They will play 2 or 3 hours of the weekend. They won't play during the week.
Right, so you ban them from in the week?
I limit the time, so they have to do the homework.
Right, so actually your whole plate thing was a complete load of old doo,
no, it's about having a conversation.
Actually, when it comes to
with
your children, you're giving completely different advice. You're saying, I'm limiting the amount of screen time you're getting.
No, what Andy is doing is refraining from suggesting that you just give your child free rein over whatever they want to do and leave them to their own devices like a lot of parents do nowadays.
You do. You ban them from doing it in the week.
But I don't ban them. I introduce other games.
But if you, Mr. Head Geek...
Oh, of course. That's what it always comes down to in these programmes, when it's any sort of counterculture, something like that, that they don't understand. They'll say, oh, he's a geek. What is that bringing to the conversation? All it's doing is revealing your true nature and just showing that you have no understanding and can handle anything different to your own worldview.
There's a reason. You know it scrambles their brains. And by the way, it does scramble their brains.
So if your hypothesis is correct that video games scramble the brain, then how come my brain wasn't scrambled when I was a kid, when I was playing games all the time? Like, I should have been utterly zombified. In my opinion, I think it was because I wasn't playing games like Call of Duty, multiplayer online games where you're just going around shooting people over and over again, and then the match restarts and it's just the same again. I think it's because I was playing a wide variety of games that actually, you know, needed some brain power behind them to figure out what was going on, things like that.
There's no way back. The damage is done. The brain cells get killed.
Never watched it.
Brain cells get killed, do they? Oh, show me the studies that say that brain cells get killed by playing video games. Oh no, wait, all the studies show the exact opposite, and you probably knew that already, didn't you? But you have to push an agenda on this show, so carry on.
35 minutes max a day, that's it.
And not before bed, because it jangles all the stuff going on.
We need to give...
And not before bread, because it jangles all the stuff up in here. Yeah, I tell you what, if Fortnite is destroying brain cells, you must have played a whole lot of it, love.
My lovely daughter-in-law's a teacher, and she will tell you about the kids that come into school...
Exhausted, right?
Half asleep,
yeah.
Right? Because what they've been doing?
Yeah.
Watching Love Island.
No, people haven't been watching Love Island, because more and more we see people straying away from watching television and doing more worthwhile things instead, like playing video games. And is it any wonder when we have stupid hosts like this spouting utter nonsense without doing a shred of research and not knowing anything that they're talking about? So, as always on this kind of programme, the person that they've invited to defend video games, as it were, was given barely any chance to speak, was constantly interrupted, and really had no chance to sort of put any sort of point forward for video games. Andy also joined Eamon Holmes and Christopher Biggins on the radio to talk about addictive video games.
I think it's not a bad thing to help kids understand how to navigate this space, but really, I think parents are the best place to guide their children. They know those kids much better, and it'll be different from child to child. So advice is always good, but I think we can have sort of a knee-jerk reaction to, recent headlines about Fortnite and games like that.
Andy definitely got more time to speak, which is nice, but some of the comments from Christopher Biggins were just laughable.
And of course, the trouble is that this leads on to afterwards, when they're grown up, when children are grown up and they have a job and they go and they are addicted to gaming now online, and it's a big problem.
So this seems like quite a fair point, but I have a feeling that what Christopher Biggins is actually thinking is that if adults play video games, that means that they got addicted to them as a child, and that's why they're still playing them.
But shouldn't we be encouraging children to do things like reading? And much more interesting things than games. Bless you. Wouldn't that be something which would be nice? I mean, does that come into your book?
So that is one of the most ludicrous arguments I think I've ever heard against video games, and it could have only come from such an elitist posh prick as Christopher Biggins. I'd like to imagine him sat at home reading some intellectual book and someone coming in, bursting into his room and basically saying, "What the hell are you doing reading? Why don't you do something more worthwhile with your time, like going and playing football? Why are you playing football, you stupid posh prick?" And let's not forget, this is a man who's been on Big Brother lecturing us about how we should best spend our time.
But you see, you and me are facing this from the position of we have no idea what it feels like to, as Andy was saying, play a game and then want to progress and play another one, another one.
No, you're right.
Because you and I would sit there and go, why are they doing this?
I know.
We don't really understand the lure of all of this. It's a generational thing, I suppose, in a way.
At least Eamon has the decency to admit that he has not a single clue about the things he's talking about.
As a parent, I guide my children's diet by introducing broccoli and vegetables and things like that. If they're eating too much of one type of food, I don't ban all food. I introduce different food because I want them to grow up and know how to navigate it for themselves. And so I think it's a great analogy.
But what about video games? You're happy for them to watch them, are you?
To play them.
To play them, rather, yes.
Yeah, I am. But what I want them to do is not just to play the big blockbuster commercial games. I want them to
Fortnite.
Yeah, I want them to enjoy Fortnite a bit, but also have a wide range of experiences. Because what's on offer in video games addresses all sorts of parts of life, and it offers experiences and a way to approach a variety of topics in a really unique way that I think is really valuable for children.
It's a shame that Andy didn't get to say what you've just heard on Good Morning Britain, because I think it really does sum up what these people need to know about video games as a whole before they start bashing it. I, for one, am hoping the current trend continues of people moving away from watching television and doing more worthwhile things, as Christopher Biggins put it. Because if I did have a kid, I certainly wouldn't want them destroying their brain cells watching things like Britain's Got Talent featuring Piers Morgan. I don't think that'd be good at all.
Clearly, this is dangerous. If you can click onto a credit card and then buy downloads on it.
I've been Jake of theretroperspective.com. Please subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time.